Welcome to Sufi Magic. Today's chapter is about the creation of Jinn art, creature that can be found in all the mythologies, religions and cultures of the world, but perhaps just as many people believe in them. An equal number of people refuse to believe, sometimes in the remote villages. Evil jinns are held responsible for every problem, and sometimes in urban cities. Jinns are considered nothing more than fiction, but one thing is certain. The concept of jinn goes all the way back to the concept of human origin, be it ancient Mesopotamia or be it the ancient religion of Zoroastrianism. Sometimes skeptics considered them to be nothing more than ancient names for viruses and bacteria, considering ancient people unaware of these microscopic organisms that can cause disease, and some skeptics considered jinn only a fancy name for evil disbelievers. But in truth, none of this is even close to reality, and in today's chapter, I'll tell you about the jinn. But as I have already told you, scientifically we can only see or detect 0.0035% of this universe. Then, just like angels, to explore the jinn we will have to rely upon the sources of religion, and my primary source will be Quran and Hadith, and later in this chapter I will show you the long history of jinn in human records, and I'll split this topic into 4 segments. In the first segment I'll tell you about the existence of jinn and their kinds, and I'll present you my study on their appearances. In the second segment, I'll explain you the difference between a jinn and a demon. I will tell you how the concept of demons is significantly different from the jinn. In the third segment, I'll tell you about a certain and extremely powerful jinn who has lived the longest and disbelieved the strongest, and is the most powerful of all the jinns. And in the last segment of this chapter I'll tell you about another certain jinn who has been with us since the day we were born, a jinn forever living with us. But first, what is a jinn after all? I'm sure all of you are aware of the Arabic word jinn, which literally means invisible. This is the root word for all the subsequent words that are invisible. For instance, janeen, the embryo in womb. But what we are going to talk about in the context of this word jinn is a creature very much alive, and a very much eating and sleeping creature. Those our eyes can't see. And why can our eyes not see them? The answer lies in Al-Quran. We created the jinn with an angry flame of fire, and before the humans, we created the jinn with a flame of fire. Allah has created these beings with a composition different than ours, and Hazrat Isa reports that Prophet Muhammad informed that Allah created angels with nur, a cold light, the jinn with fire, and humans with what has been explained to you. It makes one thing very clear, that similar to the angels, jinns are made of material which has not been explained to us, and we cannot even see that material. But why can we not see that material? I have already explained that in the chapter of angels, the jinns are mentioned 29 times in Quran. In fact, one entire chapter of Quran is named after them, Surah Jinn. Considering all this, a Muslim cannot discard the existence of the jinn as a separate creation like us. Now, if you ask me, how do jinns look like? I'll ask you instead, how would you define an animal? You cannot define an animal because every animal has a unique anatomical makeup. Who would you call an animal? Would you describe a lion, or a giraffe, a crawling crocodile, or a snake? A human anatomical makeup is nearly the same: 2 eyes, 2 legs, 2 arms, a nose. If there is any difference, it is of build, size and features. But animals have different physiology from each other, and similarly, the different kinds of jinn look different from each other. Later I'll explain them to you in great details. The jinns are an extremely diverse creation of Allah. Abu Salbakashni reported that the jinn are of 3 kinds. The first kind has wings and they can fly. The second ones can shift their shape into serpents and dogs. And the third are the ones who come and go. This hadith clearly tells that there are some jinns who keep flying in the sky. Space and distances do not mean much to them, and it is confirmed by the verse in Surah Jinn where the jinn are talking to each other, that before Quran was revealed, We used to sit in the sky and listen. This specific incident is further explained in Surah Al-Kahf, that we drove a group of jinn towards you so they may hear the Quran. This incident took place in the valley of Nakhla, where Prophet Muhammad was offering the prayer with his companions, while a group of jinn from the valley of Nazibain paid attention to them. But I want to tell you the entire incident, because that will tell you how do the jinns think and act. After Muhammad was given the prophethood, the jinns were forbidden to hide and listen in the sky, and flames were thrown at them if they did try to go, and this was the reason the jinns were trying to figure out. While on the way to Tahama, passing from the valley of Nakhla, they heard the Prophet reciting the Quran and said to each other that by God, this is the reason why we cannot listen from the skies anymore. And it was then, when the verses of Surah Jinn was revealed to the Prophet that, tell them, I have been revealed that a group of the jinn have heard Al-Quran and said that we have heard something strange. Hazrat Zubair bin Awam accompanied Prophet that night, and Hazrat Sufyan reports that those jinn seemed like layers over layers of the dark clouds. The proofs of Imam Baiki are in Al-Nabawa, and Imam Baiki further elaborates that they were either 7 or 9 jinn who stood around the Prophet forming a circle. In my personal experience, a lady once told me when she saw a jinn in a form, as if heat shimmering from a very hot surface. The only difference was that she felt the heat was extremely yellowish in color. He was an extremely tall jinn, sitting his knees bent back as if waiting for something. Abdullah bin Masud reports about these invisible jinns in his report, called the Night of the Jinns, and he says, once we were with Prophet and the Prophet was nowhere to be found. We tried finding him in the valleys and mountains, but we couldn't find him, and we were afraid, assuming Prophet was kidnapped or worst, killed. Abdullah reports that it was one of the worst nights for us. When the dawn was near, we saw Prophet descending from the cave of Hira, and when we reported all this to Prophet, he told us that he was visited by Jinn the previous night who invited him to go with them to preach. Abdullah reports further that Prophet then took us with him and showed us their footprints and even their fire. Masruq further reports about those jinns who heard the Quran, that Prophet Muhammad was alerted about those jinns by an acacia tree, but I couldn't find a reference if it was the same night, the night of the jinn by Abdullah ibn Masud, or a different night than that, because jinns had visited Prophet on multiple occasions. Another kind of jinns are like snakes, and Abdullah ibn Abbas reports that serpents are a deformed kind of the jinn, just like the children of Israel were deformed into monkeys and pigs. Abu Sa'id Khudri had a nephew who was newly married. In the coming days, the Battle of Ashab was commenced. During that time, he asked for a short leave of absence from the Prophet. Prophet approved, but advised him to take the spear with him. When he reached his home, he saw his wife standing in the doorway. The scene antagonized him, so he turned his spear towards his wife, who said, "Don't be hasty, first come and see what drove me out." When he entered the house, he saw an ungodly-looking snake sitting there. He wanted to throw the snake out using his spear, but the spear accidentally hit it and severely injured the snake. Abu Sa'id reports that we don't know what happened next, whether my nephew killed the serpent first, or the serpent killed my nephew first. Later, when his family requested Prophet to pray that may he survive, but Prophet Muhammad advised them to pray for his forgiveness, and said, "Some of the jinn have become Muslims. If you see them, warn them thrice for 3 days, and if you still see them, then if you want to kill them, you may kill them." That ungodly snake in the house of Abu Sa'id's nephew was actually a jinn. In the year 1832, Sharif Yahya published a book, and he wrote, "If we were able to see the jinn, they might appear to us as half humans or half beasts." This was very interesting, because a hadith of Prophet Muhammad confirms it. Ibn Abi's father had a date farm, and he used to look after it by himself. One day he observed that dates are disappearing from a certain place. When he observed, he saw someone standing there, of the age of a young boy. He passed him the greetings, to which the creature responded kindly, and then he asked, "Are you from the humans, or from the jinn?" And he told that he was from the jinn. And Ibn Abi's father observed his hands, which were like the paws of a dog, having fur like the paws of a dog. Further, the jinn said, "The jinns know that I'm one of the most powerful ones." Ibn Abi's father asked, "Then why do you steal?" And he replied, "That we have been informed that you are the one who likes to give charity, and I thought I should take my share." That jinn appeared to Ibn Abi's father in a way that he had half transformed into a dog. According to hadiths and historical record, the jinn have appeared in the dog form perhaps more than any other. But before I go into details of those hadiths and records, I want you to know that these shapeshifters, it seems as if phonic animals, meaning those who crawl in the dirt, seem to have a certain kind of attraction for the jinn. For example, snake, scorpion, lizards. If you remember, a while ago on Brazilian media, there was a viral news about the Amazon forest. The dead body of a whale was found in the dead center of the forest. How did the body of a 30,000 kilogram whale made it into the center of the forest? Or was it really a whale? Or was it something else in the form of a whale? No one has answer to that question. All of you must be aware of Prophet Suleiman, that he was given rulership over the jinn. I have written a very in-depth information about that kingdom in the 15th chapter, but I want to tell you something from two of the verses from Surah Side. We gave powerful jinns under the command of Suleiman, and all those who constructed, and all those who dive, and all those jinns who were chained. There is a city in Spain named Ocana. There is an ancient Arabic manuscript from the time of Al-Andalus, buried beneath ruins of Muslim Spain. This strange manuscript is called the Book of Deadly Names. The manuscript speaks about a King Solomon, who was presented 72 jinn in his court, and those jinns informed the king about their powers and their abilities to do things. A similar reference can be found from an Iraqi scholar, Abu Fayra Muhammad's book, named Kitab al-Ferist. Some of the original copies still present in the museums of Vienna, Paris, Istanbul and Berlin. This book has given detailed account of 70 out of 72 jinns present in the court of Solomon. I found another reference to this incident in Abul Fazl Muhammad al-Tabasi's book Ash-Shamil, Fil Bil Kamil, written in the year 1089. I cannot tell you about all of the jinns in this chapter, but I will certainly tell you about some. One of the names is Al-Mazahib, a jinn whose body used to shine like pure gold. Then there was a jinn named Al-Abiyad who was extremely wheaty and his whole body was visible. Then there was a jinn named Al-Omar who had red skin and only his thighs were visible. Then there was Borkan who had a deep booming voice and only his back was visible. Then there was Shamhorish whose only visible part was its abdomen. Then there was a jinn named Maimon, whose feet could be seen sometimes, and then there was Zubar, who used to fly with a sand paw. I was able to find another reference to Zubar, a book called The Testaments of Solomon, written 100 years after Prophet Asa. This book speaks about a jinn in the time of Solomon, that it used to fly like sand in a sandstorm, and Suleiman sent a man with a sack made of leather to the dust storm and asked him to keep its mouth open so that Zubar would eventually enter into that sack. And Zubar actually did enter the sack and was constrained by that man, and eventually Zubar was used to lift such a heavy stone to place in Temple of Solomon, which was too heavy even for other jinns. In the same book there is another incident about Zubar from the depths of Red Sea. He recovered a pillar of rare purple stone, but upon his return he was accompanied by another jinn named Abazath, who claimed that he had seen the time of Musa. This book tells about other jinns as well. Their names are written in Arabic, Hebrew and Greek, and having the strangest of descriptions. For example, a jinn that had no head on his body. How much truth is there in these books? Only Allah knows best. But in this chapter, I have included these references because of the verse from Surah Sa'd which says, Hazrat Suleiman was given not only the rulership on the jinns, but they used to build constructions for them. And this book does speak about Suba lifting and placing a heavy stone in the temple, and that they used to dive in the depths of the oceans, as Suba did. And upon his return he brought some kind of a purple rare stone pillar. Only Allah knows best. In the exegesis of 34th verse of Surah Sad, Ibn Kathir speaks of a jinn named Sakar, who tried to steal the royal seal of Prophet Suleiman, and a 9th century Muslim scholar Ibn Faqih, who was also a geographer and a historian. He speaks of Sakar in his book Strange and Weird Creatures, that after his crime, King Solomon punished him by imprisoning him in a chest and throwing him into the black depths of the oceans. Similarly, in a 14th century book called the Book of Wonders speaks of a jinn called the Black King. Close contact between the jinns and humans will be discussed a bit later, but yes, it is possible Quranic references do support it. And a hadith by Hazrat Isa is very clear that once the Prophet told something to his wives, upon which one of the wives said, "O Messenger of Allah," it seems to be one of the reports by Khurafa. Prophet Muhammad was surprised and he asked, "How do you know?" According to this hadith, Khurafa was a man from the tribe of Ezra who was captured by the jinn in young age and stayed in their imprisonment for a long time, and after a long time, they released him, and he used to tell strange tales about jinn, and his tales were called reports of Khurafa. Before I tell you about the demons, once, a group of jinn came to Prophet Muhammad to meet and learn from him, and they asked some questions from him about the Holy Quran. Prophet answered their questions and recited Surah Rahman to them, in which it is mentioned over and over again, "What bounties of your Lord will you deny?" And hearing that, they said, "By the grace of Allah, we do not deny any of his blessings anymore." And when the Prophet recited the same surah in front of humans once, they stayed quiet, and Prophet Muhammad said, "The jinns responded better than you." On the night of the jinn, they has asked the Prophet about their food as well, and the Prophet replied that every bone which was from a halal animal, meaning slaughter in the name of Allah, its meat will increase in quantity. When your hands will touch it, that will be your food. And excrement of camels and of any animal with split hooves will be the food for your animal. Basically, this is the reason why Prophet Muhammad forbade humans to wash themselves with these two things. So far, you may have a pretty good idea how the jinn must look like. They understand the difference between the good and the evil. They eat and they drink